Imagine if that head trash was not there. Who would you be? What if I told you those fears were no longer a problem? What would you do? I'm Stephanie Costello, a mom of 3, wife, and avid mountaineer. Beyond all of these, I am, very much like you, an average person trying to navigate this thing we call life. My goal with this podcast is to bring to light the truth about what intimacy really is. You may smile, feel called out, or learn something new. Either way, you will learn you are in control. This episode is brought to you by Safety in Freedom. Are you struggling to find safety in the freedom you create? Or maybe you're struggling to own your power, embrace who you are, and break free from those toxic patterns? Well, let's help you solve this problem today. Let's figure out what is really happening in your relationships with yourself and others. You can do that for free today at safetyinfreedom.com/call. That is safetyinfreedom.com/call. In addition, if you are looking for support with what we've been talking about in today's episode, I want to encourage you to get our free tools to help you navigate your freedom. You can go now to safetyinfreedom.com to get those resources. If you'd like access to the special resources and all the show notes for this special episode, make sure to visit theintimacykruths.com. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing to you Amy Stevens, who has an eclectic background with an emphasis on understanding and finding your voice. Through the use of movement, energy healing, and even the use of crystals, Amy's client understands how to use their voice to set clear boundaries, which in turn allows for more laughter and moving out of numbness. Learning to connect to your body, mind, and soul, you become a whole and healthy person through Yoga Amy's experience in her work. All right. Welcome back to the Intimacy Truths podcast, where we have Amy Stevens here to talk to us about finding your voice. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm super excited.
You're so welcome. And I am so excited, listeners. We have so much to talk about, and then hang around till the end because you got some juicy stuff coming up for you to really figure out, like, what is this journey of finding my voice and how do I do this? So Amy, please tell us, where did your journey start?
Started in my early 20s with that good old first job out of college. Understanding that, your boss has this certain idea of how you need to present yourself within the workplace, how you need to talk to clients in the workplace. And just had some situations early on. And I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. And I don't think of that as being like New York and the big city by any means, but I wore a hat one day to work. And where I was working at that time was in central Illinois, and basically was told, hey, take off your hat. Well, in my head, I knew, oh, this is going to be bad because I've been hot. I've been moving around. My hair is going to be stuck in my head, and I have short hair then as well. And I'm like, well, let's see what happens. And so took the hat off and was told immediately, put your hat back on. Because I look gross. It was not a good hair day by any means. I did what I was told, but at the same time, I needed to express myself. And the hat was a little blingy. It had some sequins on it and was pretty good, but I didn't fight with the boss, but I knew that experience was diminishing to me, to who I was, my creative side. My background's interior design, so my creativity was not able to come forward.
That was like suppression.
Absolutely.
You were being suppressed.
And it wasn't too long after that situation that I quit that job for multiple reasons, but I just did not feel like me at that particular job. Had some great experiences. I won't forget that, obviously. And then I got another job that it just all about timing, right? How we come across certain things and how things present themselves to us. My next job was also in the design field with healthcare design. So when you think about healthcare design, you immediately go to like those stark white and nothing has personality, right? So if
Mm,
you go to a doctor's office, maybe it has those gray tones and it feels depressing. Well, we were all about making things feel upbeat and calm. You still can have that upbeat through artwork, but the sense of being nurtured when you went into these facilities.
mm.
Well, at the same kind of in this time frame, that's actually when I got into yoga, was because I was starting to feel in my body like this kind of drawing in and a lot of tension that I had never experienced before in my life.
Mm.
And a girlfriend said to me, "Hey, let's go take this yoga class. You want to go do this?" And I tell you, we did. We laughed hysterically. We laughed hysterically during the class. We could not get it together because both of us felt like fish out of water.
Mm.
And I stuck with it. She didn't. And the rest is really history. I'm coming up on 24 years now teaching yoga. So my
Wow,
overall experience has been close to 26 years.
that's amazing. That's so exciting.
Yeah, it feels like just yesterday.
Yeah. And so I want to go back to your point on you were able to be creative and have personality in that second job, but then you still felt that sense of like your voice was being silenced. And one of the things that I often talk about is public schools. We're taught when to listen to somebody else's rules. When we get to eat lunch, we have to ask to go to the bathroom. Like my daughter, she came home and was like, "Can I go to the bathroom?" Like, why the hell are you asking? You don't ask to go to the bathroom. You tell your teacher you're going to the bathroom because you have to go to the bathroom and she's responsible for where you're going. You don't have to ask. You tell, "I'm going to the bathroom." Like that's kind of, and I obviously had to go back and have a conversation with the teacher of like, there's no silencing voices here. And one of the things they say all the time about Melody is uh, she definitely knows how to tell us what she needs. Another real quick example, my her teachers, teachers often will say something like, "We're first graders, stop acting like kindergartners," right? Like this kind of that's a common thing that you'll hear from teachers. That, you basically the preparing them for the next grade kind of thing. Their intention is to prepare them, but their language is conveying a completely different message. And so Melody's like, she calls us kindergartners all the time, and I'm not a kindergartner, I'm a first grader. Or maybe it was like, I'm not a first grader, I'm a second grader, whatever grade it was. I don't even remember. And I was like, okay, then tell her you don't like that and to please stop calling you a kindergartner, that you're a first grader and you're learning. And so I had to have a conversation with the teacher of, just to prepare you, because I'm sure you're not going to know how to respond to this. This is what she said, and this is what I told her to. And I total no judgment on your choice of language, absolutely no judgment. And by no means am I insulted that you've said it. It's just this is what I'm teaching her to do, and this is the perfect environment to do it. And now the teacher comes home with her hair braided all the time, and right. So she's learning to use her voice at a very young age in a system that is not designed for you to have a voice. So in your life experiences, where else did your voice not being clearly heard how you craved it to be heard or expressed show up in your life?
Well, that's it's interesting because I guess it was in my late teens. So I was in high school. Some little nuggets came up probably in elementary school, but I really started noticing more in high school. And
Mm.
I was, it was interesting because I was often turned to by teachers and even my peers in school to kind of give leadership.
Interesting.
And so that was something, my senior year of high school, I was student body president.
Okay.
And even now, past high school, um, I was asked to put together our class reunion. Well, I was not the class body president or
Mm.
student, like the student class president. I was student body president. So
Oh, wow.
that was not in my role,
Mm-hmm.
but I ended up doing it and that worked out fine. But there was also things that came up even in that planning. And I'm like, I don't even live here anymore. Why am I doing this? And
Mm.
so that was interesting that I didn't say no. I went ahead and I did it. But I also said, I won't be doing this again.
Mm.
So that was one thing that was a really interesting dynamic for myself. Um, I was in my, what was that? Goodness, I think I was in my 30s at that point, maybe early 40s. And it just was a very interesting dynamic on how that turned. Um, in this whole process of starting yoga, and I came across a flyer about feng shui.
Mm.
Remember in the 90s when feng shui was like really big? It was
Yeah.
just starting to come up in the Midwest. But that was something that when I started participating and understanding in these classes and reading books about it, I was like, oh, well, I think I'm already doing this. Understanding the energy of a space.
Mm.
And again, coming back to the healthcare design, we would look over the plans of the potential project, and I would give forth my input about how the energy flow could work better. And I was told, you know, I understand where you're coming from. I get that, but please don't ever talk to our clients about this.
Oh my.
And so that was another example. I did have it at the house with my dad. Um, it was more from a verbal abuse situation. And I now can say that because I understand what took
Mm.
place.
Mm.
But really, I mean, I kind of looked at myself as like the black sheep of the family, where it went in one ear, out the other whenever he spoke to me,
Mm.
because it wasn't how I was raised by my mother. And, there's that whole dynamic with
Mhm.
that. And um, so I'm really careful on how I present things to my clients to make sure that they understand that they're in a safe space. That's a big feature as well.
That energy and that boundary. Oftentimes this two things: qualitative versus quantitative, measurable, or not qualitative quality. That energetic boundary, that energetic experience that is not measurable, that you can feel the electric pulse
Yes.
between two people, but you can't touch it or see it or feel it, right? Or touch it with your hands. You can feel it with your heart and your body. And then there's the quantitative, which is I earned this money, so I bought this shirt, right? It's measurable, you can measure it. And then even a little bit deeper is impulse versus intention. Impulsively experiencing energy, or impulsively buying, or impulsively, measuring things versus intentionally measuring things.
Mhm.
And in your situation, what you were referencing with that, like that challenge of communication in your home, there's a lot of impulse involved in that style of communication. And sounds like as you're moving through your healing journey and your work journey, which is like, oh man, it drives me bonkers when don't talk about the things that are essence of being a human, like you're only allowed to be robotic. It like, no, why? And so it sounds like you're really you so tell us about your journey of the boundary piece, and how you were able to really stand up, because that determination and resiliency muscle, another invisible thing that is just something we choose to do on a daily basis, is very hard, and one of the hardest things that most of the listeners and clients that I work with deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I've never worked for like a corporate 500 type of company. It's always been more of a smaller
Mm.
setting, no more than probably 15, 20 employees at a time. Um, the the part about what I learned through those first two job experiences out of college, and for me, like I didn't know you weren't supposed to work
Yeah.
weekends or 12 hours, 14 hours a day. Like to me, I didn't learn that because my dad was a commercial pilot. And so growing up, dad was gone for anywhere between 3 to 5 days out of the week, just gone. So my
Mm.
mom was basically a single mom. And it just was such an interesting dynamic because I thought work meant you had to be gone, like for extended amounts of time. I never, even in college, they never talked about
Yeah.
that. So that to me was something that, also being a Midwesterner, hard work is part of our culture
Mm,
in the Midwest, but I'm not a farmer. I'm not I'm not up at the crack of dawn milking cows or whatever.
yeah.
But still, that whole dynamic about understanding work-life balance and getting that time frame under control, that was another big chunk that I learned from my second design job. And the yoga was happening at that point, as well
Mm,
as the feng shui, and I started creating more of a space that felt comfortable to me. I loved the job, but I also realized I'm an entrepreneur.
yeah.
I like to do things kind of out of the box
Hmm.
and
Rules are
not.
meant to be broken, right?
Yes, absolutely. And understanding, like, okay, well, yeah, this has been working for this amount of time, but
Mm,
what if we tried something different? What if there was something else that was created? And I just was finding that that was not an opportunity for me in either of those first two jobs that I had. So I ventured out, quit my job, got my yoga certification, and had a
and
yoga studio. And
here you
yeah,
are,
here I am,
several years later.
decades.
I That's like so exciting. That right there is the essence of determination and resiliency. Experiencing, committing, and creating change, and doing so in a way that is accepting of the discomfort that comes with sticking to that resiliency and that determination. One of the things we do a lot of talking about in the work that I do is pain is inevitable, but suffering is an option. Like, I understand the pain you're experiencing right now is so overwhelming that you just want to rip your hair out, or you feel like your insides are going to explode from the inside out. I totally get it. But you also get to choose whether you suffer through this pain, or whether you continue to navigate your life with intention and, committing and remaining to your true essence of who you are. Again, setting those boundaries and really speaking to your voice and using your voice effectively. So I'm curious, and I'd love for you to share how Yoga Amy and how you help people and what it looks like today.
Yeah, so originally I started out with a brick and mortar, had yoga classes set up, and that's how Yoga Amy came to be,
Mm,
was that I grew up in the same area where I had my first yoga studio, and people saw me out. Well, I'm great with faces, I'm horrible with names.
mm,
But my clients, the people who came in for yoga classes, they were like, hey, it's Yoga Amy. And so I would walk through the grocery store or something, and somebody would call out Yoga Amy. And so that was how Yoga Amy came to
mm,
be. And then I just went ahead and made that my business name. And so, from the standpoint of how my business has evolved, I have since moved to Arizona. So I'm no longer in the Midwest. I'm now in Phoenix. And I work now. The last couple of years, this was actually something I wanted to do starting in 2019, but 2020 it took over. I
mm,
closed my second brick and mortar, and I now teach all of my classes through Zoom. So we connect. We have a great community. I have shifted also to those who have limited range of motion. So many of my clients have had weight issues, they've had knee replacements, shoulders, hips, feet, ankles, whatever the case may be. They may have arthritis. They may just not feel comfortable being in a group setting where they have to leave and go to a gym and be
mm,
around other people. Um, I create a very safe environment for them, and I give them beautiful alignment adjustments that they can create for themselves. And this is about body awareness.
mm,
The thing about yoga is that when you start out in yoga, you don't know your body. You know you're in pain,
mm,
but you don't know your body. So I may say, lean into your right foot, and most people will lean into their left foot, or they'll move their hands. or their posture will shift. And in 24 years of teaching, it's one of the things that my clients have always said to me, I don't have to touch them. When they trigger their brain and they open their ears and they really listen to the cueing that I provide them, they don't have to look at me. I don't have to touch them. They are using a whole other side of their brain that gets them into their body. And that's a whole other way of teaching yoga. I started out touching everybody, and I got to tell you, it safely
Yes,
touching
of course.
everybody.
Yeah.
But I also left, I would start class, I would feel great, but I would leave. My back would hurt, my toe would hurt, I'd have a headache, my shoulders hurt, my hands hurt. And it was because I was the magnet pulling out all the crap in everybody's bodies, and then it resided in me. And that's also something that they don't really teach you. They do now, but back in the 90s, they didn't teach you about that energy exchange and how to release that. So more recently, and when I say recent, in the last 10 years, I have now understood and teach to my clients about what does it mean to be a highly sensitive person? What does it mean to be an empath? What is this energetic balance? Are you like a bowl where you capture everybody else's energy and then you're taking on kind of a different personality than you normally would? Or are you a colander and just allowing their energy to flow straight through you out to the other side and you're not containing it? So that's a big chunk of also what I teach.
Yes. So much amazingness in everything you just said. First off, I feel like you're giving such a whole new sense to the finding your voice aspect, like finding your body and finding your voice in your head to really connect to your body. I feel like is part of your what you provide. And that you do not get that from every yoga teacher. You can tell when teachers are there just to teach and when teachers are there to really make a difference and have an impact. It's an energetic exchange that you can feel as soon as you walk into the room. And then another thing I want to point out, and hopefully you're okay with me using your example, the touching of others, that physical reliant of you was causing that sort of codependency. And the only reason why I pick on that in a very loving way is because other people in our listeners and clients and whoever, we don't necessarily understand sometimes the decisions that we're making and how it's creating reliance on us. And we're not actually helping the person. We're actually hindering them from being able to grow on their own because we're doing for them instead of with them or helping them. And I learned that from working with kids with autism. If I used my voice to instruct the child every time they needed something to learn something new, we have to sometimes, depends on the child, but sometimes we have to start from the voice sometimes. And let's go with touching. Those of you who are listening, go on YouTube. You can watch the video on YouTube, but we would start hand over hand. And then we would just start hand on top of a hand. And then we would hold wrist. And then we might nudge elbow. And then, so we would slowly remove ourselves from the situation so they can learn and then just get a little bit. And then eventually they'll start doing it on their own most of the time. And so there's this level of the reason I share that story is because I want listeners to understand there's this level of being helpful and actually allowing the growth to happen versus doing for and pushing the growth to happen, pushing versus pulling, right? If you're pushing, then you're putting in too much effort. Or no, if you're pushing, you're kind of helping a little bit, but if you're pulling, you're doing all the work. So.
Yeah. And that brings kind of my mind back to some of those timeframes when clients, when I was young and teaching, and I would go over and I would push on somebody in downward dog to get their hips to lift up and back. Well, I could tell if their hamstrings were super tight and they weren't going to move and they needed that little nudge. I'd always ask,
Of course.
May I
Permission
give
is
you a
important.
little, yeah, permission is important. And I'd always ask, can I give you a little push just to help you to feel what this could potentially be in your body?
Mm,
And so some would say yes, some would say no. And I learned who was comfortable. And I also, even just walking by someone, I could sense, nope, don't touch.
mhm.
Like I could just feel that. There were times that I did group classes to groups I was not familiar with. I would come into like a school district and help them out as part of their teacher conference day where they were being educated by others. Um, I did a group class. I had probably 90 teachers and support staff in the gymnasium. And then I brought my senior students with me. So we we divided out
Yeah.
the room and I'm on this massive microphone teaching everybody. That was also an interesting dynamic because I had to not only watch my senior teachers with me, but I also had to watch every single person in the room. And I'm walking around and I'm only doing verbal cueing.
Mm,
That was it. And so to be able to observe how teachers were taking in the information. And again, when we are disconnected from our body, we do not know hands from feet, right from left. It's just, it's a
autopilot.
yes, and it is a completely different sensation
Mhm.
when somebody pushes you out of your comfort zone. And it just is, I love those classes when the light bulb goes off and you see the person just have, it's like in
It
their
is.
body, it's like they just become this,
I
I get it.
totally understand. I remember having that moment of like, no way, it's happening. Like one of the things I always tried to do was flip my toes over without having to lift up my feet. And all of a sudden it just happened. And I was like, oh, like you could see it in my body coming out my face, like I did it. And then you'd have this huge shit-eating grin on your face the whole class. Yeah.
Exactly. And it is such an amazing experience when
Mm,
you get to that point. But if you come into your first practice thinking that you're going to have that light bulb moment, it may be like the dimmer gets turned on. It's not a la.
poof. Yes. Yeah.
And those tiny steps are important because that's how we start to grow and understand and connect more to who we are.
So powerful. And I love how you gave the example of using your voice effectively to influence your students, right? Instead of sometimes we can be, not necessarily us as professionals, but humans in general can be impulsive with our words and reactionary, and instead of intentional and with love. And that has like been a huge passion and commitment of mine, to not only use my every ounce of my being for love, but to also pass that torch on to everybody else. Like, do you really feel, and I was actually going to go somewhere, but I'm going to go circle back to something that you said of um, there's resistance when we push people out of their comfort zone, or there might be resistance but not attacks on us if we help them, or acceptance of their where they are and just being with them where they are. And that we're able to do that as helpers. We're able not to take it personally. We're able to hold space for you to just kind of be with you where you are. And sometimes we might give you a little bit of loving nudge and it might be uncomfortable, but it's meant with the best intentions. And if you communicate it effectively, it really then allows for that train to keep going, that accountability. But
Yeah. And I am a direct kind of speaker.
same. I love it.
And that's not for everybody.
Mm,
That that can be very off-putting by some, but
yep.
I also attract the people who desire that.
Mm,
I don't do well reading between the lines. If you have something to say it. And if don't make me try to figure out what it is, that don't be passive with me.
mm,
Like that's one of the key things. And I'm telling you, as a yoga instructor, as an energy healer, I cannot be passive.
right.
you have to ask some of those hard questions, especially in the energy sessions. There are times when a client will stay with me for multiple sessions, but I'm not feeling like they're getting to the next level. If I'm not being asked different questions, they're not having a result.
Mm.
So taking it to that next level, and each individual is different. I totally get that. And I'm not a, hardcore conversationalist. I'm just going to ask.
Mm.
And it is done from a loving space, but to understand, oh, and it's because they didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know that the next step is right there in front of them. It's like they know they need to walk forward, but the curtains are closed.
Right. So how to get around the curtain over the wall, right? And sometimes that
Yeah.
that initial like, oh, there's something here now, and then it's either our natural instinct is to question, well, what the hell's this thing? Get out of my way, right? Or some
Right.
people's natural instinct is to be like, oh, okay, it is what it is. And
That's it.
sometimes it is what it is, but sometimes it's like, wait a minute, it is what it is for right now.
Yeah.
I'm the rule breaker and the why baby. Like for right now, okay. But in 2 hours or 2 days, we're gonna revisit that.
So you said that about the why breaker. I have a story, and I will never forget this, nor will my mom. I was in pre-K, right? So what does that make you? Like 4?
3, 4,
3,
yeah.
4, something like that. We did this play, and you know how kids are crazy, right? We did this school play, and my only line in the whole entire thing was, tell me, I want to know.
Did they pick that intentionally? Did they set your parents up for a good laugh?
And it was like, that was my only line in the whole entire play. But honestly, that has been my life. Tell me more. I want to learn more. Tell me more. Why? Well, if that doesn't work, well, why?
Yeah.
What else can we do?
Yes. So exciting. So I want to say thank you for being here and thank you for sharing your journey. But I also want to ask, is there anything I didn't ask that you would like to leave the listeners with?
So there's a summit coming up.
Yes, which I'm so excited for.
I am hosting the Mental Health Awareness Summit. We are coming out of 2 years of just change for everybody. And one of my heartfelt pieces is giving others the opportunity to hear from a new voice. And so not just my clients, but those presenters who are coming into my summit, giving them the opportunity to share their knowledge. And thanks to you, you're also one of my presenters. Yes. And I'm super excited about that. But this opportunity to have some of that content that maybe you would not have heard anywhere else in your world. And it's not just heavy content. My whole viewpoint on things is, there's a time and a place for heavy content, but then we also need some of that brightness in our lives. And I have a beautiful balance of lineup with presenters, and I am just super stoked. They are the gamut, I'm telling you. When you think about mental health awareness, one of the things that I miss is traveling. So I have somebody who is going to be talking about traveling, and I'm not going to give away what they do because they're not a travel agent.
That's not what you think it is. Yeah.
It's not at all what you think it is. And I am super excited about that one. We have most people are familiar with EFT. So I have somebody who's not just going to talk about it. We're actually going to do something with it. So that's another beautiful piece. I'm curious if I'm the only one in the last couple of years who've thought this, but it's like, I have a book inside of me.
Yep.
How does it need to come to fruition?
I
So I
started
have
writing, but I haven't finished any of it. So I'll be
so
listening on this one.
I have a presenter who's going to talk about how to write a book, and it's
Mm,
not that hard to get published.
nope.
His content, I'm just blown away in the short amount of time I've already been able to talk with him. So we've got a great lineup, both male and female presenters, all coming from the heart, all wanting to share and allow for tools to be presented for not just adults, but also for teens, for kids, and how to build and use these different techniques and tools and just grow. So I'm super excited. It's actually going to have a kickoff on Wednesday, February 9th with a live call with me. And then pre-recorded information will start then on February 10th through the 12th. And then for the VIPs that join us, they actually get to have a live Q&A breakout rooms with each of the presenters who are present that day. So I'm super excited about this whole piece and just sharing knowledge. So tell me more. Tell me why.
Yes, exactly. And
I want
this
to
is
know.
a very unique, definitely it is a very unique opportunity. So if you're curious on how to learn more and where to go to sign up and learn more about it, where would they go to find that information?
So on my website, and it's my name, Amy Stevens, which is STEPHENS.net. They will be able to connect to the main information about the summit coming up. And so it's really exciting. I have met some amazing people throughout this process, and I can't wait for others to have that experience too.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here and thank you for sharing your trust and your vulnerability.
Well, thank you. And I also want to thank you dearly for helping me to find my voice. This whole process of growing your own business, it takes place for each individual differently. And, everybody has a story. And honestly, I have multiple stories, but I never understood that finding my voice was part of it. And I have you to thank.
You're very welcome. Thank you for that.